I know, you know, if we get together, we can make the world green. All green. All green.
Hello, my name is Denise Abdul-Rahman with the Chisholm Legacy Project, and welcome to the Global Afrobeat. This is our 8th episode, I believe. We're on our 8th episode, and this Global Afrobeat all kind of started with a Global Afro-Descendent Climate Justice Collaborative, where we almost have about 45 representative countries. We're wanting 50, and we have about almost 200 different attendees, where we're really working on our transformation and liberation across the globe, where we want to change these systems that are really impacting our Afro-descendant communities, no matter where we live. So tonight, I'm so glad to have two people that I haven't even met. So I'm going to really enjoy this program, learning everything about them and their perspectives. But tonight we have Elona, and we also have Nadiya. And I'm going to ask each of them to just kind of really share, who they are, what their community is, however they define it, and kind of just what they're doing in their part of the world, and share what part of the world they're in. And then we're going to get into some things around the Conference of Parties 27, because we're all here in Egypt, or we've been here in Egypt, and we've been working on this climate change. So if we could go ahead and have Elona, would you like to start?
Yes, I would like to start. Can just confirm that we can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you very much. So what question exactly would you want me to start with? How?
Just tell us who you are in any kind of way that you'd like. Maybe what geographic location you're in,
Okay.
that you're from, and who do you consider your community?
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Elona Erezi. I am from Nigeria, West Africa, and I'm a management consultant. Currently, I work in a consulting firm, and I provide advisory services for issues around public health and how they relate closely to climate change. Yes, I belong to a community of youths. One of them is Yongo.
Elana, you froze there a little. You said you belong to a youth group, and one of them is, and then we did.
One of them is Yongo. Can we hear me now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yongo, and then that I advocate for climate change issues there, promote it in Nigeria. And oh yes, I belong to a couple of other youth initiatives. I sit on the board of Inspiring Girls Now in Technology Evolution. Is a STEM NGO that focuses on improving and advocating for girls to take up STEM careers so they could innovate for the SDGs. One of them is climate change issues, technology solutions to the SDGs and climate change issues as well. That will be all for now. Yeah, as we go on, I'll talk more about myself.
Thank you. And can you share with our audience just real quick what the acronym ESG means? Is it environmental, sustainable governance?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And Nadiya, who are you, and where are you from, and what are you working on, and who do you consider your community? And welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Nadiya Khalif. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a youth activist based in Virginia, but I'm ethnically Somali, and I'm from the Somali diaspora. My parents are immigrated to the US and created a life there for us. I would define community as a unity between people who share characteristics. And so for me, I find community with young people, and I also find community with the Somali diaspora. And so what I do is I'm a part of Earth Uprising, which is a youth-led organization focused on peer-to-peer climate education. And they've brought 20 activists two from each continent. And so far, we've been working on setting up bilaterals with change makers, and I've been able to sit down and talk to some Somali parliament members and discuss with them my plans for Somalia. I also have been a part of Virginia Youth Climate Coalition as the regional organizer, so I've met a few other youth activists in Virginia. I do some mental health advocacy. I would host workshops for mental health and talk about the importance of mental health and understanding people who suffer from mental illnesses. I also am very active in my local mosque. I organize events for the community and for people who are interested in interfaith organizations. And yep, that's me.
I appreciate it. You both are doing quite a lot in your youthful years here. So thank you for sharing. And that makes me want to just add maybe just a slightly different question that I hadn't planned to share. But from a youth perspective, why is, working on the climate change issue maybe especially important to young people? And then maybe if you'd say why it's even more important maybe for a youth person identifying as one of Afro-Descendent, do you think that there's an extra challenge there? Elona?
Oh yes, so I'm just gonna say that I believe climate change issues affect every other area of development, be it health, education, every other thing that you can think of. Okay, so I'm going to use education for instance. There's a lot of conversation around climate mobility, around displaced people, especially indigenous people. There's a lot of conversation around break in economic activities in such regions deeply affected by climate change. And at that point, what we're really talking about is not if there's formal education, if people are going to school or not. That's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about how they're going to survive. And if you want to look at it from the health angle, we're also saying how accessible are public health facilities to people in areas that have been mostly affected by climate change issues. So the issue of climate change is not just one of those other topics. It's the topic that every other development issue, revolves around. We get this right, and then we could build on that foundation. If not, we'll keep, going and going in the wrong direction with a lot of climate change crises and issues here and there, and then there will be a lot of halt and reverse development, if I'm going to say that, in the education sector, the health sector, the girl child. We're talking about economies that will be deeply impacted and all of that. So yeah, I believe climate change is at the core of every development in every economy.
Thank you, Elona. Nadiya, how do you think in regards to the question, climate change, like why is it, direly important to young people and maybe particularly those of African descent or Afro descent?
Well, it's important to young people because we're often referred to as like the future leaders, but I think that we're the present leaders, and climate change will most likely affect us in the upcoming years. So it's important for us as youth to advocate for climate change. And a lot of us as youth, we have a lot of innovations, we're creative, we have so much passion. And throughout movements such as the movement within the US, like the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of times we've been seeing that youth have been in the forefront of those movements. Youth have been the ones who've been advocating for Black Lives Matter. And as an African diaspora, it's even more important because we often aren't included in these spaces. Whenever I would speak at conferences or panels, I would feel very, very alone because I would never see someone who looks like me. I was always like the only Black Muslim there, the only Black person, in fact, and just being in those spaces, well, just being the only person there who relates to being from the African diaspora makes me feel very isolated. And so we as the African diaspora are most impacted, more impacted. We have countries that are being impacted the most, like Somalia. And so it's important for us as youth from the African diaspora to be in the forefront of the climate change movement.
Thank you. And I know you're kind of saying that you're, there was a woman today on a panel that we had for Black feminists in regards to race, racism, and climate reparations talk today, and why that should be a part of the UNFCCC negotiations. But the point I'm getting to here is she was Liberian, but she also lives in DC. And she, so it's kind of, connected to both. So I just want to ask you, when you talk about Somalia, and I don't know if you talked about like the dire impacts and things that are happening in Somalia as it relates to climate change. Can you share what you know about what's happening in Somalia and why this, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, this is a fierce urgency of now for the young people and all human life there?
Yeah, so first, I'd like to talk about, so there's a war on terrorism in Somalia. Terrorism is an issue. And so, weeks ago, there was a terrorist attack that killed hundreds of people and left 400 injured. And so for Somalia to focus on climate adaptation projects, it's very difficult since we're still fighting terrorism. But Somalia, along with the US government, has been working on eradicating terrorism. And we also have environmental issues. So every year we have a drought that dries up the Shabelle River, and people from the rural areas, their cattle die, and they're left very malnourished because all of their incomes come from their cattle. And so the pastoral communities have to migrate up to the cities. And so there's climate migration that comes as a result of that. And then in addition to that, there's waste management problems in Somalia. In the streets of Mogadishu, the capital, there's litter all over the streets, there's cans, and there hasn't been a system really placed to clean up the litter. Despite there being 2 landfills in the city, there's still a lot of litter on the streets. And on top of that, there's issues with food systems. There's cattle like roaming around the city, and there isn't a proper protocol for food systems, for sustainable waste management, and there isn't any. Well, there are some efforts for climate adaptation for the people most impacted by the droughts, but it's been very hard to implement because of the war on terrorism. And so millions of people are very malnourished in Somalia. And so when you search up Somalia on Google, you see pictures of babies who are like very thin and very fragile. And it really breaks my heart seeing Somalia in that state. And when you hear of Somalia, you think of pirates, you think of people who are like very starving, but Somalia is a country of culture. Somalia is a country of poetry. We have so much culture. We're very passionate. And for me, being a Somali activist, it inspires me to work hard and to study environmental sustainability so that I can go back to Somalia and implement environmental policies and also help farmers with regenerative farming so that they can be able to survive the drought seasons.
Thank you, Nadia. And that's so beautiful. And so, you're like a seed that's been planted, and, it's a lot for a young person to be holding on your shoulders, and don't hold it all because we're a collective, right? But thank you for sharing and taking us into Somalia. Elona, so the next question is about, the COP27 and the different sessions that you went to, but if you also want to share any other perspectives around, where you live and like the climate challenges that you've observed, or some of what we call a just transition where we're fighting this bad and bringing in the good. You can even share some of the good things that you maybe see that's happening from a sustainability or resilience perspective, or you can go straight to what sessions have you went to and what have you heard since you've been here at COP?
Okay, thank you very much. So I stay in Nigeria. Nigeria was hit with flood.
Sorry, we're having just a little. Do you need to put the mic up for you? We're having just a little difficult hearing now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, so I'm from Nigeria, and recently Nigeria was hit by a very massive flood. We have 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory, and over 20 of them were affected. Access to livelihood was cut short. A lot of people had to move to campgrounds. Access to public health facilities in some areas were difficult. Education was halted. There were a lot of people were actually suffering and going through a lot of difficulty. And then that's where I'm coming from. But something good that I've seen.
Sorry, we can't hear you. Something good that I've seen, and then you cut out. So.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Just a little.
What's really happening?
There. That's perfect.
Okay.
Maybe if you stay leaned in. Yeah. Good.
Okay, so currently Nigeria launched its energy transition plan. Yeah, that's meant to resolve some of the make an attempt to resolve some of the energy transition issues that we might be experiencing in Africa, in Nigeria, that can be scaled to other parts of Africa. I mean, in COP27, there were a lot of conversations about. You can hear me? You can't hear me? Yeah, so in COP27 here in Egypt, there were a lot of conversations around the implementation of the energy transition plan for Nigeria. When I go back to Nigeria, I'm hoping that I'll become an active part of that process in the implementation of the transition plan. Other than that, there are a lot of high-level negotiations going on right now. Even, at the what we call the Blue Zone, we will have high-level meetings. And then I'm going to be joining some tomorrow and Friday. But so far, there is some acknowledgement of the current challenges we are facing in Africa with regards to its voluntary carbon market, carbon crediting, carbon financing, and all of that. There's a lot of conversations, and I see some positive outcome, coming out there. So yeah, and then I've attended some side events, and again the conversations have been heavy on climate financing, establishing a uniform framework for Africa's value voluntary carbon market to be priced properly, and moving on to the health effects of climate change and how we could, mitigate it better to, to reduce its effect on the health of people, to a lot of other conversations that I am struggling to remember right now. But then, yes, there's been a lot going on at COP27, and I'm happy to have been a part of a majority of them.
Very good. And so what have you heard about this term, loss and damage? And
yes,
what, I'm in, I guess, what you call a developed nation. And how do you feel about developed nations, being the most contributor to the greenhouse gases? And, what's the responsibility from countries like the United States and other developed nations to, in your perspective, in your understanding?
So in COP27, this was echoed a lot in a lot of conversations and meetings. And then from world leaders and from most of these, developed countries in the West, there were again commitments in talks of how they are fully aware that they're the most contributors of GHGs, greenhouse gases, and how they are implementing a couple of plans to mitigate the effects of climate change and finance climate initiatives and prepare more for loss and damage initiatives towards the most impacted nations, some of which are in Africa, Nigeria, and the West. So, yeah, I see some form of commitment, but again, it goes beyond talks and it goes beyond launch of policies and plans. It goes into actual action, and that's what we're demanding for here. And we're hoping that by COP28, a lot would have been done, implemented, and actual action would have actually, begun.
Thank you so much, Elona. So just turning to our audience, if there is one at this moment in the live stream, you've heard it, Elona saying action, action right now. And so if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them into the live stream. And also know that whatever you say here, that, it could be that Elona or Nadiya takes it to the negotiators. They're actually in the room. They're talking to people. They're influencing the process. Last night, we had a guest colleague who said that this is I'm going to misquote him here, but he was like, this is the most human rights issue of our time, as far as, or he said that these negotiations are like the most important thing to humanity, I believe was maybe closer to his quote. But if we, so it's so good and encouraging to see you both already knowing, already, actively involved. And so then we just go back and we bring some more of us, right? So that we can have that perspective that's gonna, make sure that all of us are able to thrive. Nadiya, you mentioned the word bilateral talks. Can you go ahead and share, what types of meetings and things that you've been hearing and listening to that you can share with whomever's going to be listening to us? And what is this bilateral talk?
Well, so bilaterals are just meetings that you can have at COP with change makers or, politicians. And so just a day ago, I organized a bilateral with a Somali parliament member who works with the Ministry of Environment and other Somali youth activists. And we sat down and we talked about setting up a youth advisory board so that next COP we can have people from Somalia, youth activists from Somalia attend next COP, because technically I was the first youth delegate for Somalia this year because I was given a badge by the Somali delegation. But that being the case, I want there to be more Somali youth who are present and who can share their experiences living in Somalia and how that's impacting climate advocacy. And so as for other bilaterals I've had just, simple meetings with people who were like presidents of companies, like the president of American Forest. He's someone who lives in Virginia as well. And I've talked to him about, setting up a grassroots organization that teaches kids about the SDG goals. And as for other bilaterals, my organization, which is Earth Uprising, other youth activists within my organization have been meeting politicians. Like today, we were trying to meet Lula, the president of Brazil, and we had a conversation with Nancy Pelosi, a few youth, a friend of mine named Naz and Reem and Alexandria attended that conference, and we're able to talk to Nancy Pelosi directly. So just being at COP, we've had amazing opportunities to reach these people and talk to them and express our concerns to them.
Excellent. And congratulations for breaking that glass ceiling for Somalian youth. And I'm glad you mentioned that the new president of Brazil was here. I was sitting next to a person, her name was Ananda, actually from Brazil today, and she was talking about how excited she was and looking forward to the change that she thought the new Brazilian president was going to bring to her country. And do you think these conversations that you're having, I mean, you're just talking to people. What kind of difference do you think that makes? Yeah, I'll just stop there. What do you difference? Why is it important to be at that table and talking?
Well, to be quite frank, I think that I'm more inspired by the youth than the adults. And because the reason why is because I've met youth who are innovators and who are just doing so much within activism. And I've met actually one Somali youth who was working within a 3D printing lab, and his organization was 3D printing coral reefs because in Djibouti, where ethnic Somalis live, the coral reefs are dying, and so they're 3D printing coral reefs for fish to breed and lay their eggs there. And so just seeing someone young working on those kind of projects have really inspired me to also, work towards these kind of goals. And then I also met someone who works for a law firm who's 25 years old, who calculates carbon emissions for his law firm. So I think the most I've gotten from these meetings is that I've been more inspired by youth.
The other voices that you're hearing around the table and the relationships that you're making while you're here at COP.
Yes.
Yes. I so agree. I think somebody wrote a book around us connecting us. And I think the connections and the relationships are the most important, and that we're the ones that are going to be solving these challenges, right? So for ourselves and from the policy part, we'll be, at these tables trying to influence those that are, already, I guess, in power. So I'll just kind of turn to the question around race. We have this resolution that we put out on race, racism, and climate reparations, and for this UNFCCC, and just our UNFCCC. And just wondered, do you all think, one, that none of these negotiations mention anything about race, except for that there was a group called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that mentioned that colonialism was basically the underpinning for, the exacerbation of climate change on people, vulnerable people, people of color. But do you think that race should be explicit in the negotiation documents, and why? Elona? If you're talking, you're on mute. Elona, if you're able to. Okay, we'll go ahead and turn.
Hello.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I guess it was happening my network. It was there was a glitch there. So could you repeat just the question you want me to answer?
Do you think that race and racism and climate reparations should be explicit in the negotiation documents? It's not there right now. Do you think it should be, and why?
Well, honestly, we all say that there's no longer racism in the world, but I know I still feel it sometimes, you know, being a Black African lady. But I mean, I think it should be there. So I'm going to refer to a statement. I can't remember who made it, say 2-3 days ago. I think when the world leaders were speaking. And then one of the African leaders said that, when the West is running out of gas, it's, there's usually very quick action to put pen to paper to sign another document or another deal that makes sure that they have gas ASAP. But when it's the most impacted countries, like Africa, those in Africa and other countries in Asia and all of that, everybody's reluctant to put pen to paper to sign those same documents that will make sure that those people are safe and I mean, also enjoying the privileges of living a climate, a life where there are no climate risks and issues and all of that. So I don't know if I should peg that to racism or a race issue, but I think there's a problem somewhere when it happens that if it's a particular set of people, oh my God, everybody's so quick to action. The whole world is in panic. We need to sign this. There's no gas in Europe, this, that. But we're talking about millions of people dying every day from those same actions created by those countries. And everybody is, it's still talk now. We hope that there's some action soon, okay? So yeah, just for the safety of it, I could say that the race component should be included. But if it's there, everybody's trying so hard not to make it so obvious. If it's there, everyone is really trying to cover it up. Well, I think it should be included.
Thank you, Elona. No, it's not there. We've written a resolution that we intend to present and have presented to different leaders, but still would like you all's opinion. So Nadiya, do you think that racism, and climate reparations should be within the UNFCCC negotiations for COP27 and beyond, and why?
So as you mentioned, African countries have been exploited by the global north by colonialism, and so there's gold mines and there's coal mining and there's a lot of pollution as a result of these countries. And so I think that it's important for the UNFCCC to adopt a framework of intersectionality by understanding how colonialism and racial injustice has played into climate change. And, it's always the most marginalized communities that are being impacted by climate change the most. We don't have the same level of protection as privileged communities. As I talked about, people in Somalia who are suffering from droughts. We're a developing country and we don't have the same resources. And we were also once colonized by Italy, and so the Civil War has made us very impoverished, and a lot of countries are being exploited for their resources, and to acknowledge that these marginalized communities are being exploited, and that racial justice has played a part in climate change, I think that that's very important.
Yeah, thank you. So if I told you that, when I spoke to Afro-Brazilians, they say that 50% of their water is unpure, that they are living in challenging housing that's on like mudslide conditions, that they suffer from flooding, and that they are the most vulnerable in their community. And then if I told you I live in Indiana, and the most vulnerable communities in Indiana are those people that are Afro descent, that are subject to like the most, violence or police brutalities, and also the lead poisoned water, and the flooding, and just overall, and living by the coal fire power plants and the gas plants, and thus this makes them more vulnerable to the impacts of climate, their food apartheid conditions. Or if I told you that in the Mississippi or Jackson, where they're in a water crisis right now, and same situation where there's lack of investments, lack of access, not having any of those clean energy jobs or development. And, we have Somalia, and we've got Nigeria, and whether you're in the Netherlands or whether you're in Australia, if you identify as a person of Afro descent or a part of the African diaspora, do you think it's a coincidence that our communities, when we think about Haiti and that earthquake that happened there, and then they came to migrate, to the United States, and then were just sent back, or any other parts of the world, sometimes just sent back. Do you think that this is just coincidence that they happen to be of African descent? Or do you think this could be intentional by design? And then do you think that we all should be doing something about it intergenerationally? So I'll put that to Elona. Elona?
Okay. Yeah, I
Okay,
guess you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I think in response to your question directly, okay, I think, yes, we should do something about it intergenerationally, because I really do think that if there are issues that, if we don't address these issues right now, we're going to keep talking about them in every COP, and then we'll keep having the same issues, and then keep pleading for actions. So right now is the time, and we have to take actions about them now. Yeah.
Nadiya?
Do you mind repeating the question again?
Well, I'm basically saying I gave these examples across the globe where the systems of environmental injustice are happening, which makes these communities the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate. And all these communities really happen to be a higher percentage of them are people that identify as people of Afro descendants. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think that's by design? And, how do you propose that we, right, intergenerationally, if you do think it's intentional, like, what should we be doing about it
So I
to
think
make
that
it stop?
yes, thank you. So I think that it's very intentional, and I think that we have to advocate for climate migration to be recognized, because climate migration is not recognized as a form of refugee. And as you mentioned before, people from Haiti had to leave Haiti and migrate to the US because of the earthquakes, and they were sent back because they're not officially recognized as refugees. So advocating for sets of policies that protect these communities, like making climate migration recognized as a refugee, and also fostering intergenerational conversations like this, having youth teach other youth about climate education, and creating grassroots organizations. And also it's important for us to make education, climate education specifically, more accessible for our communities, and make sure that people within our marginalized communities understand what is going on and the issues, the environmental issues, and how that's impacting them. Because with education, that will be able to empower the people from our communities to step up and advocate for a set of laws that will protect them.
Very good, thank you. So I guess as we start to think about wrapping up, well, first I'll say, if there's any live stream questions out there, feel free to put a question to Nadiya or Elona. And again, we have I have apologies. These systems are by design to pretty much um, make us be the sacrifice zones no matter where we are in the world. But we'll just conclude with, so we need you to join us, go to the Chisholm Legacy Project, and we'll get you involved. We're going to be identifying secretariats for different regions or for different issues, and we're going to be working on this. And we're going to be releasing that resolution and trying to really influence this process. And then we got to go back home and continue to work on these issues. So let's just close out though, Nadiya and then Elona, on what gives you hope? What are you going to take back to your home when you go home? And what maybe was the best thing that you can think of that happened to you here in Egypt at COP27?
So I would say the best thing that happened to me at COP27 was actually meeting people from the Somali parliament, because I've always felt, as a Somali American, I've always felt very isolated, as I mentioned before. But meeting other people who also identify as Somali and who are working within the environmental field, just seeing their work has very much inspired me. And I've had conversations with the parliament members, and they've told me that I should come back to Somalia and do projects with them and advocate for climate education in universities. And so I'm just very inspired to go back to Somalia, because we have a huge Somali diaspora in many countries, including the US. And many of us, like my parents, haven't been back to Somalia in over 20 years. We haven't seen our homeland for so long. And I haven't even had the opportunity to go back. So for me, I've just been longing to go back, and just meeting people who are telling me come back. It just kind of filled that little hole in my heart. And another thing that I would say made my experience amazing here at COP it's just being able to network and put myself out there, and also just learn from other youth activists, learn about their projects, learn about what they're doing. And I was also able to learn about what other countries are doing. I've attended meetings with other ministries of environment for other countries, and they've been talking about the implementation they've been doing for climate action. And so hearing from them has inspired me to like read articles and research and study hard in university so that I can come back to Somalia and also implement those climate adaptation projects as well.
Thank you, Nadiya. And Elona, what gives you hope? What are you going to take back to your home, sharing about COP27? What do you look forward to?
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, COP presented me with the opportunity to network with a lot of youths that were doing amazing work in their space, especially from those from Nigeria and other parts of West Africa that I might not have met before now. And of course, seeing the work that youths were doing in their various spaces really inspired me to go back to where I came from and, to do more. Again, I'm going to take back the proceedings of the negotiations and the meetings to Nigeria, and then I could use them to continue work over there and demand for action, more like following up on implementation. Yeah.
Thank you, Elona and Nadiya. And I guess it's really important too that you're making, as young people and even intergenerationally, but you're getting to know all these people and the roles and where they're at. And plus, you as a collective of young people will already know each other as you come year after year and become the negotiators, right? Or the heads of state that are making these decisions at these conference or parties. You're going to be filled with lots of knowledge and really being able to shift the paradigm. So I just really appreciate your genius. I'd like to say Black genius. I hope that's okay. And just so proud to have been on this conversation with you all tonight. And thanks for making time for being on the Global Afrobeat. And we'll keep hope alive. And thank you. Good night.
Thank you for having us.